Now on to another wonderful subject. Now I don't know if you've ever enjoyed employing people, sacking people, performance managing people, anything to do with people actually. Have you ever thought how much easier your job would be without people? It'd be really easy. Without customers, without employees, it should be wonderful. However, we know that that's not possible. It's not possible at all. And managing people is not always the easiest thing to do. It's stressful. You lose sleep over, who do I employ? How do I get rid of someone? So all these sorts of things are important, and we need specialist advice. Our next speaker is Natasha Hawker. Now, Natasha is a small business owner running employee matters with her husband and business partner. Are they the same person? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, cool.
We're still married.
And they're still married. Has he been performance managed? No?
Not yet.
They work mainly on the east coast of Australia, and they have 10 employees of their own. She's worked in employee relations for over 21 years, both nationally and internationally, and she is routinely featured in the Sydney Morning Herald and the Startup Smart. I could actually keep going and going, Natasha, because there is a lot of things that you do, including being an author.
Yes.
So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but can you please make welcome Natasha Hawker?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming out midweek. We really appreciate you turning up. I think Helen has done an outstanding job. I've flown in from Sydney, and I know David flew in from Brisbane, and we're very excited to be here. So thanks for having us along. As Stuart said, my name's Natasha Hawker. I run an employee relations company, and I'm an employee expert. So think employment contracts, policies, recruitment, and terminations. We are very passionate about helping business owners grow their businesses faster than ever before through their people. So I know that 97% of businesses in Australia at the moment are small businesses, and they have two main headaches. One is cash flow, and the second one is employee headaches. And that's what I want to help take away, some of those employee headaches. So just to give me some perspective of who's in the room so that I can pitch this appropriately, can you put your hand up if you have employees? Okay. All right, keep your hand up if you've got over 15 employees. Good. Okay, put your hand up if you don't have employees but you want some, or you're planning on getting some. Good. There's a few of you. I have a client, who David knows as well, who said running a business would be so much fun if I didn't have employees. So yes, there's a lot of people who feel that way. So what I want to try and do is to talk to you about how you can build elite teams. How do you hire them? How do you motivate them? And then ultimately, if it's not working, how do you get them out the door without getting sued? So that's what we're going to spend the next 30 minutes talking about. So hopefully that will cover off what you're looking for this evening. So why is an elite team critical? I wanted to start with a little story. I actually, many years ago now, almost 10 years ago or more, I decided it'd be a great idea to hire a yacht in Croatia and sail around Croatia with 10 friends. Now that's not quite as extreme as it seems, because I had grown up on boats. My sister's here this evening and she'd grown up on boats too, but I didn't have a skipper's ticket. And to rent a yacht, you actually need some qualifications. You need to be a qualified skipper. I was living in London at the time, so I duly went off weekend after weekend after weekend and learnt how to navigate, safety, how to control a ship, how to read all the buoys, and all of that stuff. And I felt very good, and I got my skipper's ticket. Well, the one thing I didn't learn when you're sailing in Croatia is Croatian. I couldn't read the radio. I couldn't hear what they meant on the radio. I couldn't read the maps. I've got 10 people on a boat, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I've really mucked up here, because I couldn't do it. So I just had to go with experience, and then I had to go with the gut. And that's what a lot of people do when they're actually recruiting. They go with the gut. So I actually then had to recruit who are the 10 people I'm going to, or 9 plus me, I'm going to take on this boat. Now, believe it or not, as much as I love this, going sailing isn't all about sipping champagne and watching the sun go down. There's a lot of stuff that can happen on a boat that doesn't go well. So I actually had to choose friends that I knew could cut it if things got difficult. And actually on this trip they did. Not only that, of the 9 friends I took, guess what? All of them were older than me. One of them had actually been my boss, not once, but twice. I was used to taking instructions and orders from her, not the other way around. I also made sure I brought my brother along because he was actually the only one who actually had any sailing experience. The others all had great attitude and they were all up for it, but they had 0 sailing experience. On reflection, I think I was absolutely mad, but anyway. So we get on the boat, there's all of us there, and I actually had to sit everyone down and say, guys, I'm going to have to yell sometimes and I'm going to have to tell you to do stuff and you've got to do it and you've got to do it fast. How do you feel about that? And they were all okay. They were all still very keen at this point. We'd only just got on the boat. And then I had to give everyone a job, and jobs were things like washing up or cleaning up or deck duties or whatever. And everyone took their job. So everyone had their job description, if you want to think about it that way. So this was the motley crew, minus the one who took the photo. And I have to say, there's so many things. I've dined off this story for years because there's so many things that went wrong. But effectively, right at the end of the trip, we decided the engine was conking out all the time. That's the technical term, conking out. And we weren't going to make it back to the yacht club in time. So we decided to go for cover. And we found a bay on the map that I couldn't read because it was in Croatian. And we decided that was where we were going to go. The issue was, 1, the bay was full. And 2, if any of you know anything about sailing, if you actually sail, the wind has a lot to do with where you go and where you don't go. So I basically brought everyone up on deck and briefed everyone and said, this is the plan. We're going into that bay over there. You can see it's full. I'm planning on anchoring over there. Now, here are all the things that could happen without having a motor and we're just sailing. And here's all the things we're going to do if that stuff happens. And by the way, girls, you're down below. Now, that's not very good for my girl power mantra because I'm all about girl power. But I actually needed the guys on board, and you can see they're all quite burly guys, and they're quite tall. Because what happens is when you're sailing, you need to drop the sails really quickly, and the girls couldn't even reach to get the sails down. So we put our nose into the bay, and I've spotted my spot where I'm going to go and drop anchor. And the bay's full, and there's nothing that attracts an audience at about sunset in a bay than somebody who's stupid enough to come in and do this under no motor. They actually think you don't know what you're doing rather than the fact you don't have a motor. So anyway, we had the girls down below. We're coming in. I've lined it up, and as you know, the wind's going to take me where it wants me to take. I wanted to sail as close to the wind as possible. So what happens? I'm sailing as close to the wind. I get, technical term, knocked. So next thing, I'm heading towards the land, and I'm thinking I'm about to put a boat in Croatia up on land, and I could hear the keel going. So I've ruined the boat anyway. And so I'm flying along and thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then just then, I got a puff of wind, pulled her up, headed to where I was going to do, drop anchors, guys pull the sails down, and we come to a halt to the whole bay going, yay, cheers. The girls down below very quickly handed up their gin and tonics. They did their job, the boys did their job, and everyone was happy. So I think that's a really important story about having the right people with you when you need them, and that's the same in business or whether it's socially, like we did. They did have a great time. We got everyone back. No one was too injured other than someone who cut their head open, but besides all of that, it was good. So let's find out how we can find an elite team. When I first started Employee Matters, I realised I needed a framework or a methodology to help small businesses with their employees. So I came up with this 9-step employee life cycle, which takes everyone through from when you hire them right through to when they leave and everything in between. Now today we're only going to have time to concentrate on 3 areas, which is assess, hire, and exit. So I'm going to concentrate on those 3. The assess one is the diagnostic piece. Am I compliant with the employment legislation that I'm required to be compliant with? Do I know what my modern award is? And what do I do if someone's not doing the right thing? The second piece is around hire. How do you hire the best you possibly can for the money you've got to spend on it? And then how do you hire the best with that skill set? And then the last one there is exit. If it isn't going well, how do you exit them out of your business without getting sued? So they're the 3 we're going to concentrate on tonight. So let's start with the drier subject of compliance. Who knows what modern award covers their business at the moment? Put your hand up if you do know. Okay, I'm going to try one more time, and who knows, and then I'll give you the answer. Is that it? 3 of us. Okay, this is a big problem. You are all probably covered by a modern award. So quick history lesson, there were 1,300 of them. They've now 122. Pretty much everyone in this room is covered by a modern award. Their businesses are covered by a modern award. And not only that, you need a copy of it in the office, and any employee needs their modern award written into their employment contract, and also they need the classification that they fall under that modern award in their employment contract as well. So and what does a modern award cover? A modern award covers things like minimum rates of pay, overtime, an obligation to consult on major workplace change, and a number of different things. You must know, if everyone's got to go and do their homework, you all need to know what modern award you're going to cover up by, because I'll tell you about what it costs you for the breaches in a minute. NES stands for National Employee Standards. What that actually means is, in Australia, they said, what are the rules across all of Australia, no matter what state you live in? And they've covered a couple of things. They're things like everyone gets 10 days personal leave, everyone gets 4 weeks annual leave, there's some obligations there around community service, and also bereavement leave and things like that. So that's the National Employee Standards. You must give everyone a copy of that if they're a permanent job holder in your place of work. Must. So what are deemed breaches? That's one. If you don't give them the Fair Work info statement when they arrive, that's a breach. If you don't pay the minimum rates of pay, that's a breach. If you say that I want you to work 45 hours every week, minimum National Employee Standards say 38 plus reasonable additional hours, that would be a breach. So there's some examples of breaches. How do you get caught? There's a couple of ways. The quickest and most simple way these days is your employees call up Fair Work and say, I don't think I'm being paid as much as I'm worth. Can I just check how much I'm worth? That's the first way. The second way is Fair Work actually do audits, and they will go through industry by industry and confirm whether everybody in the industry is compliant or not. So that's the second way. There is also, I've heard it happen, I haven't seen it happen in any of my clients, but Fair Work will turn up in a workplace and they'll say to the gentleman in the blue shirt, who's the boss? And he might say the fellow next to him. I might have got that wrong, who knows? And they'll say, right, you don't say anything, but tell me where your modern award sits in the office. If he can't tell the guys from Fair Work where it sits, you're in trouble. Everybody needs to know where it is and have access to it. No one's going to read it. Don't worry, it's 60 pages. It's really boring. They're not going to read it. But you must have it available, either on your intranet or as a hard copy. So what happens if you are non-compliant with your modern award? The fines are quite radical and they've just gone up. It is $54,000 per breach for an organisation. So a breach would be not consulting on major workplace change. So you're moving offices and you just say to everyone, we're going to, where am I going to say, Seaholm or somewhere, I don't know, Williamstown. You're going there and you can't do that anymore. That would be a breach. So up to $54,000. But individuals can also be fined. So if you are responsible for the employees in the office, you personally are liable for $10,800 per breach. So they are significant. Now, what I would say about breaches, when Fair Work came in on the 1st of January 2010, Fair Work were really good guys. And they were a bit lenient because it was new and they just changed it. They're losing their patience. It's been in 6 years now. They've lost their funny bone. They're just not interested anymore. So the big thing is make sure that you have a compliant employment contract. Make sure the modern award is stated in it and the individual's classification under that modern award. And your tip for this section is don't put policies in employment contracts, because then you risk breach of employment contract, which is an expensive one. So that's compliance. So let's find out how we can find these wonderful employees that are highly engaged. If you want to find great people, change the way you're looking for them. So what I mean by that is the people who have the most success finding the best applicants are the ones that actually broaden their net. So they might advertise in Seek, they might advertise on LinkedIn, they might advertise on Facebook. They look for these people in different places. If you want Gen Ys, They're looking for jobs on the go, so you need something that's going to transfer to a mobile device. The other thing is around recruitment is you need to look for your passive candidates and your active candidates. Your active candidates are the guys who've got their Seek alert that's sending them all the jobs that are in their dream price range. Your passive candidates are the ones that could be tempted to move if there was a nice tap on the shoulder with a nice salary, but they're not actively looking at the moment. That is 70% of candidates, and they tend to be sometimes your higher performers. So you need to start to find your way around that passive candidate market so that you can start to look for them. Talent pools. This is a concept that I got in corporate land. I'm all about using corporate best practice and applying it in a way that makes commercial sense to small business. So what I mean by that, to give you an example, a very large insurance company did an assessment of all the critical roles in the business. And guess what? It wasn't the CEO role. It was actually a role called an agri-banker. They only earn about, I think they earn about 75K a year. But what they realized was they were a very critical role to the business. And when they lost one, it took 100 days to find another one. So that role was vacant. If you think on average, 30 days that people would resign, that role was vacant for 70 days. That costs a lot of money. There's a figure I can teach you to work out what that costs the business, but it's a lot of money. So now what they do is they interview a whole pool of agri-bankers. And so say Leanne's one of my agri-bankers and she resigns. Guess what? I've got these people all the way through the recruitment process. They're in a holding pen. And then I just go, right, I've got a job. Here's the job. Here's the contract start in 4 weeks' time. So it massively reduces that recruitment pipeline. So it's really worth doing. Your recruitment process, I would encourage you to follow the same process every time you do this and follow it consistently. And your candidates want to leave you with a good impression, whether they get your job or not. So what I would love for you to do is to map out your recruitment process, follow it consistently. But if people don't get the job and they've invested 4 or 5 hours in interviews and finding out about your job, it's not good enough to just flick them an email to say, sorry, you didn't get the job, mate. You need to be able to call them and say, I'm very sorry you didn't get the job. The reason for that is this, here's some feedback. We really, you only just missed out. We'd love to talk to you next time. Because whilst that candidate may not be right for you now, guess what? In the future they may be, and you want to protect your brand. You do not want to risk mucking them up, because guess what? They end up to be clients sometimes or referrers of work and so on. If you do it really well, you can actually go back for them. And there's an example, and I'll use Tiffany because she did it. She was recruiting for a very senior role, was paying about $250. This guy had been through numerous interviews. He didn't get the job. She had spent a lot of time giving him feedback and let him down very effectively. And he was disappointed. Yeah, he was. But guess what? The client was growing so rapidly, they actually had another role, I think it was a COO role, paying a similar money. Tiff rang back and said, by the way, guess what? I know you missed out and you're disappointed in that. They've decided you're actually brilliant for this job. Would you take that job? And he snapped it up. Now, the reason why he snapped it up was because his candidate management experience had been very, very good. So it's worth considering. Think about referrals. Good people know good people. You take nothing else away from tonight, but sometimes they need a little bit of help to think about all the good people they know. I would much prefer you to pay $3,000 to one of your employees because they found you a fabulous receptionist than pay $10,000 or wouldn't be that much, $7,000 to a recruitment agency for doing the same thing. So think about actually a star search or a reward program. Reference checks and background checks. I'm not going to embarrass you by asking you to put up your hand if you do reference checks. The vast majority of small businesses don't. Let's use the example. If you pay someone $56,000 a year with on-costs, it's probably going to cost you about $72,800. You don't think that's worth a phone call? Reference checks, it's not what they do tell you, it's what they don't tell you. But when you do a reference check, you need to put a little disclaimer on the end, which is a data privacy disclaimer, which you must legally do. But honestly, guys, do a reference check. And don't just ask them, who'd you like me to reference check? When you're going through your interview, when you look at the job that they were in, say, and who did you report to there? Oh, you reported to Stuart. And what was Stuart's role? As you're going through the interview. And then when you get to the bottom and you say, and who would you like me to reference check? And I don't get Stuart's name, I'm wondering why I haven't got Stuart's name. So think about your reference checks. The next one is background checks. Does anyone know what a background check is? If we talked about reference checks, just throw out some names. Anything? Police check, yes. Working with children check. Credit check, visa check. Do you guys know that if you hire somebody that hasn't got the legal right to work in this country and they get found out, you're going to get fined for it because you didn't check their right to work status. So it's a great second check is get them to bring their passport along to the interview and just check the passport. One, it gives you the identity. You're actually interviewing Lisa, and Lisa is who Lisa said she was. And secondly, you can check their right to work status. So it's a really important one. Background checks cost you about $200 to $300, maybe $400 at the most. 10% of my clients have previously been subjected to employee fraud. One to the tune of $180,000 from her friend who was the HR manager. They're not friends anymore. But imagine, do those background checks. If they're touching money, background check. I'd prefer to spend a couple of $100 on a background check than $180,000, never to be seen again. Testing and qualifications. So testing and qualifications is make sure they can do the job you're saying they can do. So if they've said that they can do that, test it. We had a client who was a email marketing digital agency, and they used to give anyone who got through the interview process a little test, and it was like, here's a proposal, have a look at the proposal, tell me what you think about it, find all the errors. Well, guess what? They actually found some errors that weren't meant to be in there. So already they've proved their worth and they got across the line. The other one I would highly recommend here is hands up anyone here who thinks they're a great interviewer. Now that's when I didn't expect you to put your hands up. Most people don't think they're good interviewers, and most people aren't, I hate to say it, and it's because you were never taught how to do it. You've never been taught how to interview. And so you typically Google it, or you watch someone else who isn't a particularly good interviewer and copy all of their mistakes. You can get better at it. But if you're not a good interviewer, I would encourage you to invest and improve in that skill, especially if you're going to grow a team. But the second thing is then, use something called Harrison's assessment. I love Harrison's. Harrison's basically is essentially, it maps you to the job. So if you're a HR manager, it'll map me to a HR manager role and say whether I'm a fit or not. And then, brilliantly, it lists all the traits that are required for a HR manager in order of preference. So you know how when you've got someone working for you, after about 6 months you work out their graded attention to detail, hate standing up in front of an audience. But this tool gives you all that information straight away, so you can put them into work and good practice and get them to play to their strengths straight away. Creating high-performing teams. So a group is or a team is a group of individuals who have who have some skills that combined can give you a project or an outcome or do their jobs. So why do you think people are desperately lining up at the door at the likes of Zappos, for those of you who like shoes, Google, any of those companies to work for them? Why do they want to work for them? They get to, yep. Culture. Culture's a big one, massive one. They get to work with great people. There's no deadwood in those organisations. They very rarely hire it, and if they do hire it, they exit it really quickly. The reason why I've got Gail Kelly up there, ex-CEO of Westpac, was when she talked about the 7 lessons of life and business, she talked about buses. Now, I'm not expecting Gail Kelly has actually caught that many buses, but she talks about buses in the sense of get the right people on the bus and the wrong people off the bus. She'd read a book by Jim Collins called Good to Great, and he did a survey over 5 years and he interviewed 1,500 organisations, and the number one reason for success was having the right people on the bus and getting the wrong people off the bus, and off the bus quickly. So this is a skill. If you're going to grow your business, you need to get really good at, one, identifying talent, and then there's a whole other piece about engagement, but we don't have time to go through that tonight. So I think that's a really important one. Unfair dismissal claims. Last financial year, there were over 14,000 unfair dismissal claims lodged with Fair Work. That's 58 every working day of the week. And guess what? Over 75% of them are small businesses. And the reason for that is that most small businesses don't have an in-house lawyer, they don't have in-house HR, and as a result, they don't know how to exit someone out of their business. I'm guessing most people in this room think if you do 3 strikes and you're out, that's still okay? No, not anymore. That doesn't exist anymore. So again, no one likes having these unpleasant conversations. They're not easy to have, but you need to get good at it. If you have 10 employees in your organisation and one of them isn't working, I can guarantee you most of the team know who that is, and most of the team are fed up because they're carrying the load. And that's 10% of your workforce. Small businesses can't afford to have 10% of their workforce not actually working for them. It doesn't make any sense. You guys work too hard. It's not worth it. So you need to get good at exiting people. If you do it badly, guess what it costs? Up to 6 months of their salary and or reinstatement. And guess what work like doing? Reinstating. Can you imagine if you fired someone, it's gone appallingly badly, and then you get them back just because you did it badly. So it's really, really important that you understand what you can and can't do around unfair dismissal. So there are 4 or 5 main reasons that you can terminate someone. I'm not going to go into some of the others that are not related to this, but one is performance management. They just can't do the job, or they're regularly turning up late, which is around misconduct. The other one is gross misconduct. So if we just cover off those 3 as an example, thank you. So performance management of a non-performer. So say somebody just is not up to it, they're just not doing the job right. Then you need to call them in and have a discussion with them and give them a chance to respond. And you also need to ask them whether they want a support person to come in on that meeting. Now, if you either deny them that right or you don't ask it, you've already failed the unfair dismissal test. The unfair dismissal test is, was the termination harsh, unjust, or unreasonable? And by not letting them have a support person there, you've just failed. By not giving them an opportunity to say, the reason Stuart, I say to Stuart, you're not performing, is there a reason for that? And not giving Stuart a chance to respond and maybe tell me that he's got a teething baby and he's not getting any sleep and that's why he's not performing to the level he's required to at the moment. If I don't give him that opportunity to respond, then I've failed. If I haven't provided him with enough resources or training to be successful, I've failed that test. It's no longer 3 strikes and you're out, it's what is deemed as reasonable. So I use the example, if you're a waitress and you're carrying a cup of tea to a table and it's slopping everywhere and all over me and everyone else that's in the organisation, it would be deemed reasonable to let her say, by the end of today we need to get the cups of tea to the table without losing any drops. That's reasonable. If you're telling someone they've got to bill $500,000 by the end of the week, and that usually takes 3 months, that's not reasonable. The other one is around misconduct. This is a big one. And a quick story. A couple of years ago, I went on a work conferences. Work conferences are not good for misconduct. Everybody has a few too many drinks and it all goes very pear-shaped very quickly. Best thing you can do to protect yourself is 1, lead by example, 2, suggest deliver some training before you go on that work conference about what's appropriate behaviour and what isn't. But on this conference, we had a fellow who had too much to drink. I'd gone to bed, I missed this, but he had too much to drink. In the space of about half an hour, he'd thrown a girl up on a dance podium, lay on top of her and gyrated on her. He was crawling around the floor, frightening and chasing women. He grabbed one of the general managers and bit him on the cheek. And then he grabbed another younger gay man and stuck his tongue down his throat. That was the wreck that I woke up to the next morning. Now, what do you do in that situation? You have to actually conduct an investigation because the onus is that he could have been guilty, or there may have been a good reason for it. So we conducted an investigation. He was mortified. He said someone had slipped a Mickey in his drink, but on the balance of probability, it had occurred, and there were people who were genuinely frightened for having him in the office, so we had to terminate him. He actually rang me for a reference. Now, that's one of those examples, and somebody rang me. That's an example of it's not what I did say, it's what I didn't say. So yes, but if I had not conducted that investigation in a fair way, even though what he'd done was appallingly bad, I could still fail the test of unfair dismissal. if you don't do it correctly. And the last one is sort of gross misconduct. If you know that was pretty gross. But the reason there is a difference, I couldn't terminate him without notice. I had to do the investigation. Gross misconduct, if I absolutely punch someone and everybody sees it and the police gets dragged in, I could probably risk terminating that individual who threw the punch, and I don't have to pay notice. So you've just got to understand the difference between gross and... So they're the three main ways you can terminate. If you ever get yourself in that situation, get help. It's too expensive not to. We actually usually come in and George Clooney fly in, fly out and fire people. Yeah, from up in the air. I wish George was there. So he's not. There is an unfair dismissal calculator on our website. It costs you a lot of money, even if you're in the right. So what I mean by that is the way that Fair Work works, they want you to mediate. So if somebody lodges an unfair dismissal claim, it's $60 and a phone call, so there's no barrier. If they don't know, I can guarantee you their friends and family do. So they will get pushed towards that. And then you'll get a call from Fair Work and all this paperwork. Helen talked about paperwork. There's about 8 hours of filling out paperwork. And then you sit on a mediation call and they try and resolve the matter. And even if you're 100% in the right, you've got to go through that process. And to just give you a rough idea of what that will cost, if you pay yourself about, let's for argument's sake, pay yourself about $50 an hour and the employee's earning $55K, that's going to cost you probably about $800 or $900 just to find out you actually did it right. And then if you go through, it's further. Okay, I'm getting the wrap-up signal. I just wanted to pause. Do I have time for 2 questions? 2 questions. Anyone got any questions? Yes,
I'm just
Janet.
interested to know there used to be a minimum requirement depending on the amount of people you employ.
Great, yes, so well done. Glad you asked that question. If you have under 15 employees, they can't take you for unfair dismissal, as in they have no access to that legislation if they have worked for you for under 12 months. Once they tick over to the 12 months, they do have access to unfair dismissal.
So exactly the same as everything.
Exactly. The other thing just to remember there, another protection for you as a small business, this 15 is a really important number. Redundancies, they didn't used to be paid unless they were in your employment contract. Now everybody is entitled to redundancies if you have 15 or over employees. Now, even if you don't have 15 employees, you still have to follow the redundancy process, which is it's a 2-stage meeting process, and you still got to pay out notice. You still got to pay out all their entitlements, but they're not entitled to a redundancy payment. So just check that. Any other questions? Yes?
I guess a lot of the discussion is about employees, I'm guessing, specifically, but what about if you have contractors on your team or a large part of your team is contractors and contractor agreements?
That's a great question. We just had our employment lawyer, Graham was there in the office the other day. Fair Work and ATO hate, and I don't use that word very much, but they hate independent contractors. And there are 2 reasons, and Helen will probably guess this. ATO don't like them because guess what? They pay their tax at the end of the year if they do. So there's no pay as you go happening. Fair Work don't like them because they don't get any entitlements. And a lot of business owners use independent contractors. I'm not saying you. A lot of business owners use independent contractors to avoid paying entitlements. And it's called sham contracting. Now, if you get caught for sham contracting, the fines are $54,000 or $10,800 and back pay of entitlements. So if that independent contractor has been working for you for 4 or 5 years in that role, that's sick leave times 4 or 5. Maybe they took 7 days, not 10. And that's 4 weeks annual leave and all the other things. Yes?
I just read an article this week in relation to a HR. It was a company that was employment company.
Yep.
And they had deducted admin and meal allowance of $25 a week out of their employees' pay.
Yep.
And it's the HR person was fined as well as the CEO,
Yep.
even though the CEO...
We are now liable. I have very good professional indemnity insurance.
It's right down to the line.
It's right down to the line.
Anyone who
If
has
you
anything to do with payroll.
Yeah, you need to be very careful. There was just a case where a HR manager had known that the employers were deliberately breaching Fair Work, and they got done for it.
Even if he said that he didn't know,
Yeah.
they said, well...
Well, they would do an investigation to work it out.
He
But
still got fined.
yes, that's very possible. What I would encourage you to do if you have any independent contractors, there's a test, and it's a multiple test. And the classic one, and when I started my business, I thought I was going to have independent contractors, and I didn't, because I want my people to do it the employee matters way. True independent contractor, they can give that work to whoever they want without your knowledge. And if they won't pass that test, they're not an independent contractor. They're for short pieces. All right, I'm getting given the wrap up. Last slide, I do have a book here for sale tonight. If you want to fill in any of the blanks that we haven't been able to cover in the last half an hour. Thank you very much for your time. I'm hanging around for a drink at the end of tonight and would love to answer some more questions after that. Thank you. Thanks.